Hi, I'm Kim Gladden, Director of Discipleship. I want to welcome you to today's Discipleship Conversation. We're going to be talking about connecting with immigrant neighbors, and we're streaming live from Facebook. You can join us in the chat room. I think we have an exciting conversation today. I want you to be a part of it, so I welcome you to join us by coming in with your questions and your comments. I'm excited to share my guest today live in the studio. I have Reverend Zach Samara, who is our National Director of Immigrant Connection, and we have Dr. Dave Drury, our Chief of Staff here at Wesleyan Headquarters, also a church planter. And coming in later in the conversation by Zoom, we have Reverend Nellie Rodriguez, and I'm so excited to have you hear a little bit of her story. She's an actual immigrant from Nicaragua who's now a church planter for the Wesleyan Church. So welcome, and we want to jump right into today's conversation. You know, the Wesleyan Church, we have part of our model that says that we want to be a transforming presence in every zip code. But the reality is that zip codes, or the landscape, the demographic of zip codes, have been changing. And so how do churches respond? How do we respond as a church when we say we really want to have this transforming presence? How do we respond to this change? And we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about it. We know that every church is on its own unique journey, and every church responds in different ways. So we want you to know that it'll be comfortable for you to join the conversation no matter where you're starting from as we talk about this. Let's start with you, Dave. You are the statistics man. You always have some good statistics to share with us. So I want to say welcome, but can you share maybe, when we think about the landscape of zip codes changing, anything that statistically comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that most of us just have to look around and say there's some changes in our communities. And part of that has been a shift from like when I was a kid in the 70s to now. There's been a gradual increase in immigration during that season, and there's also just been a general diversification in the United States and in Canada. And so kind of wherever you live, there's probably been some adjustments, and some places it's been a more dramatic adjustment. Some of that was because in the 1920s, there were some changes in our immigration laws in the United States that actually began to limit immigration quite significantly. And then around 1990, that started to swing the other way. And so the percentages were up at even 15% at their high point back before the 30s and the 20s. And then they dropped all the way down to like 7% when I was a kid. But then it now has creeped up again to about 14%. So it's not overwhelming, but it's definitely an increase. And part of that is just the children of immigrants. So the birth rates of people whose parents moved here from another country have been growing, whereas other people that have been born here, their children, they're having less children. So it's just changing the way our schools look. So now the birth rate, white Americans are actually not the majority of the babies being born. So that's what's changed in the statistics and the demographics around us.
You know, I think, Dave, that most of us, even if we're not numbers people, we can just visually look around and say, our neighborhoods have changed. I think, Zach, you can testify to that.
For sure. I mean, the reality is that in my little city of Logansport, a city of 18,000, it's like the late 90s, it was 99% white community, and now 1 in 3 of our families are immigrants or refugees. And so, like, within just a little bit of time, a lot can change. And even small, I mean, it's what people would think of as a farming kind of rural community that has had a drastic change. And that's just not Logansport, that's a lot of places as well. So.
When we talk about changing landscapes and changing neighborhoods, beyond the numbers, Dave, what personally, like, let's take your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
What have you seen?
Well, it's kind of one of those things that almost every community is impacted. I actually have a friend that's in Alaska, and they have a church there, and they started a basketball night. And all these kids came in there, and they were speaking with a different accent. And it turned out they were all refugees from Somalia. Then in the great wisdom of the U.S. government, they decided to put these people from Somalia in Alaska because of course, they were happy, they were safe and welcome there in America. But it was a little bit of a shock for them to go from the heat of Africa to Alaska. So even, really almost any communities do that. So as in ours, what we've been able to realize is this is just a great opportunity for friendship with people and to welcome people in. For myself and my family, we've just found some of our greatest friendships and relationships are with people that weren't born on this soil, and most of them who have moved here in the last 10 years. And so they're just some of my best friends and people that, text me almost every day and have good relationships with. So we've been able to respond just by trying to spend a lot of time with them, have meals with our friends that are immigrants, and they have us into their homes probably more than we do even into our home. And so it's been a real joy.
So, Dave, how does that happen? I mean, you're just saying like, oh, this just, we're talking about dinner and conversation. For a lot of people, what did you just approach someone? I mean, give us the scoop of how you have new neighbors, you saw new people. What'd you do?
Well,
it comes naturally to you, but I want you to share.
Well, I'm not sure I would not consider myself to be gifted in evangelism or hospitality. It's more just having the heart of Christ to have conversation with people when it comes up. And so part of it is to to not just expect people to come to my place of worship, to come to where I would be comfortable, but to connect with people where they're comfortable. And so we've been able to join some immigrant gatherings just to have them welcome us in, and in a way that they're comfortable with. And maybe that makes us at first a little uncomfortable because we're doing things on their turf. And so that's something I encourage everybody to think about, is sometimes you don't have to create something new as much as you just have to kind of get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And then you don't have to actually do the work. You just have to do the friendship. And that we can all do. That's not actually that hard.
So those are some of the ways that you've been responding in terms to reaching out to people who are new in your neighborhood through friendship, through meals, through just maybe some everyday life things.
Yeah. We don't often think about this. We think about all the different spiritual disciplines, like fasting and praying, and we're going to do this, that, and the other thing that all is on the list. There's 3 things that aren't on the list of spiritual disciplines. Usually you don't see anything about resting. You don't see anything about hospitality. You don't see anything about evangelism. And those are interrelated. There's a sense in which rest is the soil of evangelism, and hospitality is the seed that creates that harvest of evangelism. So if we can all actually just create a little margin in our lives, interact with an actual human being that wasn't born here, right? And then actually do some actual hospitality and actually welcome the stranger into our lives, to actually love someone different than us. Actually, evangelism doesn't become all that hard, because all you're really doing is spending time with, doing life with people different than you. And the results are amazing, because people are drawn to people that follow Jesus, I believe. And if they aren't, maybe there's something wrong.
And the reality is that we did a study a few years ago, and we found that 9 out of 10 immigrants had not been invited into the home of a native-born U.S. citizen. And so what I think we find is just a little bit of like opening the door, like welcoming, talking to your neighbors. It is so unusual, and yet it's so wanted by a lot of the foreign-born population that you become their favorite neighbor really, really quick. And when they have a need, or they say, hey, can I help like with mowing your lawn, or can our kids play together? It just takes a little bit. I'm sure you have found that the relationship, it's like, I didn't do a lot here, and all of a sudden I have all these great friends. Because if we're just willing to take kind of that first small step and show welcome, I think a lot of immigrants and refugees are looking for those kind of relationships and friendships, and have been so welcoming, and they'll invite you into your house, and you're eating all kinds of wonderful food together, and that's just great.
Amen.
I think you're on to something there. I actually would add a third thing to your list.
Yeah.
And that would be observation. And I'll tell you why I say that. I'm from Buffalo, and in the Buffalo community, we do have quite a number of refugees. And a couple of years ago, I was funded to do a study of grief across cultures. And that's when I really got to know our immigrant community. And one of the things that I learned is that for people who are here, when a death occurs, and we had people from all around the world that I was interviewing, but particularly even say a church said, well, we maybe don't have a big ministry, but if you have someone in your congregation who's from another country or from another culture, finding out what their grief traditions are, because we found out that sometimes there is tremendous guilt that the person can't get home to properly do the funeral rites. Sometimes there is a custom that For example, in one community in a certain country in Africa, if you're in a church and someone passes, the pastor comes every night for 2 weeks to sit with your family in the evening. And so that person's expectation of pastoral care might be a little different than what we would do. And there were so many just looking across the cultures that just paying attention.
Yeah.
The neighbor and also the immigrant that is within your visiting your church or in your congregation. And so I think I would just add that observation.
It's huge, and I mean you've done studies on it, so you kind of have a lot of more knowledge than I do about it. I was walking into this not having any clue, no training, and I had a friend. I won't use his real name, but I'll call him Nareem. And his mother died, and he couldn't go back because of political oppression in his home country. And to see what you're talking about in his actual life, and to see how hard it was to go through what you're describing, broke our hearts for them and made us have an empathy for their situation that I can't imagine. Being from America, my good old passport's pretty good almost anywhere, and I don't have to face any of the stuff he faces, and so that empathy creates quite a bit of a connection, and helps me pray better for him and to be a better friend to him, I hope.
Absolutely. So, as we begin the conversation, we're talking about entry points where a family can reach out, an individual can reach out. But Zach, you actually have a role where you talk about a more focused approach, and you serve as our national director of Immigrant Connection. First of all, stop and tell people what that is, what you do, what that is.
Yeah, so all the way back in 2013, we had a meeting with some just Wesleyan local pastors that Dave kind of led, and we were just saying, like, how do we reach out to the foreign-born population, considering this is like a huge booming part of our population, demographics are changing, what do we do? And that's kind of where Immigrant Connection kind of was born. And a lot of what people might think about Immigrant Connection, since then we have done a really good job of opening legal offices to help U.S. citizens, foreign-born population, legal permanent residents, U.S. citizens across the board. We've helped a lot of people with the immigration journey. But really, that kind of is the foundation for our desire is to see every individual, every Wesleyan local church move through a journey of learning, connecting, and welcoming. And we realize that, like, not every church, I think if people are watching and they're thinking, well, what Immigrant Connection does, I'm not ready to jump in the deep end and open a legal office yet. I just want to learn how to have a dinner with an immigrant, or how my church might be able to welcome some new people. Well, we want to help you with that because we know everyone's next step isn't the same, but we want to help people take that next step. And so a lot of what we do is creating resources for people thinking, how do I just learn more about this? Like, how do I talk about it? How do I do discipleship in small groups about it? We even have a resource right now about their car conversations. My son loves, we have these conversation cards, and like you just ask questions. And it's like, if Jesus was the mayor of your town, how do you think you would welcome newcomers? Like, what kind of party would you throw for them? And it's just conversations you can have even with your kids to say, how do we welcome great as a family? And so that whole thing to say Immigrant Connection just wants to journey with you, and I get to have lots of conversations with different pastors and community leaders and lay people who just say, hey, I'm seeing this in my community, and what do I do? And I would love to have those conversations, answer questions, say, here are some of the creative things that we're doing, and we just want to help you take whatever that next step is.
I just want to remind you that please come on into the chat room, be a part of the conversation as we're going through this conversation. Your questions, your comments, your stories, we'll try to work them in. Zach, as you were sharing, what are some of the things that immigrants are facing as they are in this country? And I think even to back up, when we think of that whole concept, we're thinking always, when we hear that word, sometimes we're thinking of people who are just coming here. But can you expand a little bit about the population here?
Yeah. So if everyone were to kind of close your eyes and picture whatever you think of as an immigrant, like we all have some picture in our mind. The reality is our foreign-born population in the United States is like 45 million foreign-born, 45 million. 22 million of those are naturalized U.S. citizens. So it's not like they're in a process. They have already kind of crossed that line, done a citizenship test, and passed it. Then you have about 12 million who have a legal status, like they have a green card. They're a legal permanent resident. 2 million are called temporary, and so that'd be like temporary protected status, or our DACA, our Dreamer kids. And that leaves about like 10 million who are undocumented. So I share that just to say that usually a common perception, if we're not in relation with immigrants, is we think, Central and South America usually right away, and we think, oh, this is someone without documents. But really, the majority in our country are naturalized or in a legal permanent resident status. However, when you ask the foreign-born population, whether they're in the panhandle of Oklahoma, whether they're in Indiana, or whether they're in a big city on one of the coasts, they all will say access to legal services is a number one felt need. There are only 13,000 attorneys practicing immigration law, only 900 nonprofit service providers. So for instance, to make it completely personal, in Logansport, Indiana, we have thousands of foreign-born population. Our school system is one of the most diverse. And yet we are in this we're this small town. So when I came to town, people were driving 2.5, 3 hours away to try to find legal services, and they cost a lot of money. So when we think of one of the ways to kind of get involved, it's like the need is how do we build capacity to provide legal services? But that's kind of the deep end. And yet I celebrate. There are probably some of my heroes are on the call that run Immigrant Connection sites. We've launched 19 Immigrant Connection sites, which when you hear 19, you think, oh, maybe that's not. We are the fastest growing church-based network in the whole nation.
The Wesleyan. We're talking about the Wesleyan Church.
The Wesleyan
now.
Church.
All right.
Yeah, we're talking about Wesleyans. And these are my heroes. The reality is, on a given day, when Immigrant Connection as a network is open, 17 immigrant families are served. And so we really do a great job of doing that. So, and we'll kind of dive into some more practical things, but from a legal perspective, if you have people in your congregation that have questions, or people in your neighborhood that have questions. This week I was on the phone with someone from Texas, from Tennessee, from Florida, and from the state of Washington that all said, hey, I have a friend and they have a question. We're glad to help, and we also need to try to keep building capacity so that these are in kind of everyone's kind of community, because legal services are a huge need of a lot of immigrants.
And what's beautiful about this and the work, and I agree with Zach, these are heroes, several of them probably connecting today. You have a lot of multi-vocational pastors that are doing this on the side, making hardly any money, or in some cases no money. You have volunteers in a church that have stepped up. Sometimes there's a staff member in a larger church that tacks it on to an already large portfolio of stuff they do. And they're just really self-sacrificing people that have done it. But sometimes people, when they hear about what Zach just said, they're wondering, what do you mean you're doing stuff with legal services? Are you helping people that shouldn't be helped? That kind of an attitude? And I understand why people might wonder that at first. The great thing about it is these people are actually certified by our government to do it the right way. And so while all of us here, in just being a part of our economy, we sort of have this sense like this with immigrants, like we want what we get from you, but we don't want you to do anything wrong, and we don't want you to come in the country the wrong way. That attitude, what helps with Immigrant Connection, and specifically the legal services portion of it, is you're helping people get right with the law that want to get right with the law. And so it just helps people enter into the process in a way the government actually wants them to do.
And I should share that when I say we should help, no one should go and try to start. Give us a call, reach out to us. Because there is a process of how you do this. You actually get recognized by the Department of Justice. Is this something that we can build capacity? We get training in immigration law. So don't just try to go and answer the questions that your neighbors might have, or people in your church. But we definitely need to do more of that. But that's one end, and we were talking, there's the other end too. And the other massive need that a lot of the foreign-born population have is just that initial connection of saying, I'm new to the community, when they move to my city of Logansport, what's the buses like here? How do I enroll my child in school? Where is the clinic? How do I get better at English? And so it's not like they want to enroll in adult school. A lot of the people come and say, can we just have a cup of coffee and kind of just talk together? And so some of the resources we provide are we have a toolkit for a family resource night. So last night at the bridge in Logansport, families came. The schools actually partner with us and they say, here are 12 new families that just moved to our city. Will you help welcome them? So they come, we have a meal together. The kids go off and get some homework help because a lot of immigrant kids, it's called SLIFE, Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. Because of things in their country, because of the journey, there's some interruptions. And so they need more than just the school hours. So they get homework help by some people who just care for them and some teachers and administrators. And the parents just sit and we help with conversation English. And then we pull in some of the organizations in our community to say, here is the free clinic if you've ever wanted to know. Here is the place that's looking to hire people and you can fill out applications. And so these family resource nights, all you need is space because all you're really doing is helping with conversational English and helping kids with homework. I choose the conversational English because I sometimes struggle even helping my 10-year-old with his homework because everything's changed. But the reality is these are just these things that are felt needs from immigrants, and yet churches, if you have a little bit of space, can offer this for 2, 3, 4 families. And we have found, as we've done these around the nation, that school systems love it. It's a great way to partner with your schools because they're saying, we want to help these kids, and yet we only have from 8 in the morning till 3:30. And so if you'll come alongside them, you can. So just a great way to practice what it looks like to welcome and connect and have these relationships.
Well, I wanted you to talk a little bit about that because many people wonder, does Wesleyan Church have anything that we're offering to immigrants? And so to hear that, yes, we have churches who actually have centers, and then to hear further that there's so many ways different ones can connect. Your church doesn't have to have a formal center.
Yeah.
Way back, well, I'm dating myself, but way back in Buffalo, Bonnie Macbeth had a center where she was teaching refugee women how to sew. And you could drop off gently used household items there. And I have a picture in my mind that I'll never forget. I had just a big pot that we was no longer using, and I dropped the pot off, and I went in the back to talk to Bonnie. Before I could come out, it was a woman, and she was dressed in her native, and she was an older woman, like a grandma. Mm-hmm. She had grabbed that pot, and she was hugging it like it was gold, and I was thinking, a pot? But then I began to think, she's probably thinking, I finally have a pot big enough to make whatever my special dish is.
I bet it was good.
I bet it was. But the way she was just hugging that, so sometimes we're thinking big things, but it can also be just a pot. Even from my study, when I was doing the study in Buffalo on grief across cultures, mm-hmm. we couldn't really have formal contact until after they finished the study. Yeah. But after the study, I would just ask I said, what would make your life better? And sometimes we're thinking, these big things. And the answer would be, we only have 4 plates. If we just had 7 plates. Mm-hmm. Like, our church we can do that. Mm-hmm. 3 plates. We only have 3 blankets. If every child could have a blanket, hey, we could do that. So I'm saying sometimes it's not even the big thing. Yeah. There are ways.
Yeah, I find that a lot of times if somebody is a part of this right now and they lead a smaller church, mm-hmm. sometimes it feels like we don't have the resources to do this. And there's 2 things about that. One is almost all of our early sites that did even the hardest stuff were some of the smaller Wesleyan churches. And so sometimes it's the widow's mite that makes the biggest difference and God adds blessing to it. And I know for me, I'm in a house church. We on a big day, we have 20 people. On Easter, we have like 40. So that's like the big time for us. And what we found is we don't even need to necessarily start programming as much as join it. So my wife just yesterday, she was a part of an English as a new language discussion group like Zach's describing that's actually at our local library as an extension of who we are as a tiny little church, a micro church. My wife also today was helping with MOPS, and 2 of the children that were in her little class were Spanish speakers only. And so she's not a teacher, doesn't have that experience, but made them feel welcome. And part of what she does is teaches everybody how to say hello. Even little elementary school kids can learn how to say hola. And so help them all do that and to welcome those kids in. And so it's just a little bit of intentionality as a church or as an individual can go a long way to starting the conversation. And then, of course, you get a little bit into it. And you're like, okay, I want to do more and more and more and more. And that's where Immigrant Connection comes in. icwelcome.org has all these resources that Zach's mentioning about that gets people on the path of saying, we're going to really make this an intentional part of what we do, even if it's not huge amount of money or people.
Dave, you just came up with a quote.
What?
That's quotable. A little bit of intentionality can go a long way.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, that's something we can quote. Got a question that's come in for you, Zach, from our chat room, and ask others, keep them coming. How often does the Bridge do a resource night like this? And when the schools ask for it, is it monthly?
Yeah, so we do ours weekly. And like Dave said, if you go to icwelcome.org, click the resources. It's a welcoming resource. There's a whole toolkit that explains the program. It even has some lesson plans for conversational English there. What we have found is usually it's once a week, sometimes it's twice. And a lot of times it shares in that toolkit, like we have a wonderful relationship. My wife is an educator, so I kind of have a good in to the schools. But in most school systems, there's like an EL coordinator who's helping the English learners. And if you go to them and say, hey, is there a way we can partner with you? A lot of times the schools we have found across the nation will say, I actually have a number of families I'd like to invite to come to this. And then what we have found is ours is almost fully run by teachers and administrators who know this is a need. So it happens at our church, but it's a lot of the community coming together to put it on. So ours is once a week. At most, you can do them twice a week, but you could do them just once a month if you wanted to, because there's always, it's not so much a curriculum as much as having space and saying we're going to help with conversational English, homework, literacy, and math for the kids. And so you can go to icwelcome.org resources and see that. Ours is once a week. We run ours so that we bring in new families kind of like every 6 or 7 weeks, because my community always has new families coming in who we want to kind of enter them into kind of a family resource night. So I'd encourage you, I think it's a great step to take another great resource, our citizenship classes. And with both of those, you don't have to remake the wheel. Immigrant Connection has kind of created it in such a way that you can just say, we're doing this, and we give you the resource, and you're just able to do it without a lot of work. So like this summer, we did 2 citizenship classes at the Bridge, and we had an Indiana Wesleyan University student who had she had never done this before, so this was brand new to her, and she ran 2 classes with Burmese refugees and also with some of our Latino immigrants, and she did it like from no experience to successfully running 2 classes. We've applied. We have about 23 people who are going to become citizens because she was able to do this and help them with it. And I mean, we give you the PowerPoint slides, we give you the exercises, the handouts, all that stuff. So as long as you can kind of just follow like an outline, that's all you need to do, and you can help people.
Zach, that is amazing. And give us the what's on that resource, because a lot of churches, we promised that if you watch today, that we would give you some resources and tools. And tell us about the resources and tools just one more time, and where they can be found.
So if you go to icwelcome.org and then you click on resources, it's 2 places right on that, right in the center of the page it'll be, and then in the header. And then there's learning resources, connecting resources, and welcoming resources. And so if you just want to do learning, there's small groups. Like you can just do a small group. Sometimes the great first step is saying, I'm not ready yet to kind of reach out to immigrants. I just want to understand kind of what's a biblical perspective on all this. It's talked about all the time. And so we have some great, in fact, we have a learning cohort, much like what you guys do, where kind of that model is great of saying, we'll do a learning cohort where people around the nation can come together and kind of go through this together. There's a sign up on IC Welcome that you can sign up to be a part of that one that's happening in the fall, or you could just, we'll give you the curriculum for you to do if you have a critical mass in your community that want to do learning. I just want to take a small group and get a biblical perspective on immigration. There's connecting things, like, so really fun. I mean, we talk about food a lot, but there's power in the table.
Oh yeah.
Sitting at a table, eating good food makes a difference. Last Sunday at the Bridge, we didn't have a traditional worship service. Instead, we invited a bunch of people from our community. Every table had 2 to 3 countries represented, and we just talked about our immigrant stories. That's actually on the IC Welcome website. It's an easy resource. It's 3 pages long. Here's how to do that in your community. You can do it with a couple families, a whole church, a church and an immigrant church. Great resource. And then the Citizenship and Welcome Family Resource Nights are on that as well. Or we want to open legal offices too. So we want to keep that up too. So if you're hearing this and you're like, I'm already doing some of those things and I want to open a legal office, There's even a whole kind of spreadsheet on how to do that, and you can contact us at any time. I love to talk about this. This is kind of what I love to do, so I'd love to journey with people in this.
And we should make clear that we love immigrants for more than just the food, but it is a fact.
It is incredible.
It is helpful. It is a nice bonus.
Listen, we've got some more questions coming in from the
Okay.
chat room, so let's get to those.
Okay.
One question, is there a collective list of churches that currently have these ministries going on?
Yeah, so if you go to icwelcome.org once again and click on locations, all of the active Department of Justice recognized sites are on there. And so, we have a few in Indiana, they're in Michigan, Kansas, they're all over. And so all the addresses, their contact information, how to get a hold of them, you can see if you have one close to you. And if not, we want to help connect you to maybe another one that might not be part of our network, but might be a church-based site through another network that we can connect you with. So they're all on that website.
Just part of what we've started to do is Zach and the Immigrant Connection has grown so fast, and there's so many experts. We have people around the nation who are really have great expertise, like Zach, have begun to shadow and train other people to do it. So this influence is not really just a Wesleyan thing now. Immigrant Connection is now something that has become a resource to many denominations and non-denominational churches, because we want to see many of these start regardless of the denomination.
Yeah.
We want them to know Jesus however they can, and we want people that love Jesus to love immigrants.
Hey, something else that's come in, a question, what sort of government involvement comes with being certified by the government?
Yeah, so how it looks is you have to get experience. Like a lot of times you can do an online class, or there's an intensive 40-hour training. You pass a test, you get that's the education part, you get the experience part. Then you're applying to the government, and they're approving you. And then every 3 years, it's kind of like a lot of other licensures, where every 3 years you're saying, I still know how to do this, I've taken trainings and things like that. So it's not like we have the government like looking over our shoulder or stopping in all the time. Obviously, we're bound by confidentiality, so it's not like we're sharing things with them. They're just saying you have the right education and the right experience, that we trust you in providing immigration legal services for low costs to immigrants in your community. And then we get to file cases. Once again, like Dave was great about sharing about the micro church. We were in a building, but we were a micro church when we started Immigrant Connection. We were less than 20 people. So if you think you can't do it, I guarantee that God chose the weakest among us, which was us, me, and He's done it through us. And so we've helped 1,500 immigrant families. We've successfully filed 967 immigration legal cases. And so the government allows us to do that. We submit them. We're their legal representation, and then we get approved. So it's not like the government is kind of all in your business or anything like that. You're just applying to them, they're approving you, then they're checking in on a regular basis, say, are you still doing this? And are you still kind of trained and up? Because as you know, immigration stuff changes quite a bit. And so kind of much like pharmacists who have to always be learning the new stuff, like we're also always kind of learning about that. And just one more thing, once a year we bring everyone together. So there's going to be over 50 people next week, Monday through Thursday, getting more training on how to do this in local churches. And so the whole Immigrant Connection team, plus some others, Dave will be there, Dr. Wayne will be there, Dr. Joanne will be there. Kind of we all gather together to say, let's keep learning on how we can make an impact in our community, help our zip codes, transform them. And so we do that once a year. It's really fun.
And it's really important to notice that this is in the U.S. law.
Yeah.
So our government actually has established pathways to do it. And the neat thing is they actually invite people to come to a church to get help.
That's wonderful. Listen, I've got another question that's coming in, and then we'll have to transition.
Yeah, okay.
But we're glad. Keep it coming from the chat room. We're glad for this. The question is, are you able to work cross-denominationally? Would the Wesleyan leaders be able to help train leaders from another denomination? This is coming from someone in the Free Methodist Church.
Yeah, in fact, we've helped the Free Methodists have a site in Cape Coral, Florida, another in Detroit. They all were trained under me, and so we've already helped the Free Methodists and a lot of other denominations. We have the Nazarenes, the Free Methodist, non-denominational. Yes, we are hands open. We have learned this journey. Don't take it alone. Come and kind of let us help you do this. So yes, we are. arms and hands open.
Okay, arms open. Lots of resources. Go to that site. Shout out to the Florida district of the Wesleyan Church offering this service. They wanted you to know that it's in the state of Florida, so woohoo to Florida. We need to transition now. I'm excited to bring in our next guest, who is Reverend Noelia Rodriguez. She goes by the name of Nellie. And because she's an actual voice, she's an immigrant who came to this country from Nicaragua, and she and her husband are now returning service by planting. They are actual church planters for the Wesleyan Church. Before she comes on board, we're going to see her story, but if that name, you said, I think I've heard that name. She was recently featured in Wesleyan Life, the feature story, her and her husband, and the new church plant. And so you can go online and read and hear more of the church plant story. And so we're going to just take a clip, and then she'll be with us via Zoom.
I left the country when I was 7 years old, so it was the Civil War. A few months after, my mom decided to come, so she sold the house, she sold everything we owned, and we took a tour bus. In El Salvador, the tour bus left us behind and took everything that we owned. That's when I felt I had to grow up very, very quickly. I went through a lot of physical, mental, and sexual abuse because of people that wanted something back for giving you a piece of bread. We had to sleep in bus stops, shelters, and the streets. To be here in America, it was the opportunity of a lifetime that I felt that I got the opportunity to be something and do something with my life instead of being in those countries with no hope and no education, no nothing. You know, now I look back and I can see that God is tying all of that up for the pastoral ministry that my husband and I have. So we need to have that compassion and that mercy towards them, to be able to understand that they're human beings and not put them as a other.
Nellie, it's so exciting to have you with us today, and I've just been so inspired. I was reading your story and looking at your story in Wesleyan Life, and I'm just glad you're here to share a little bit with us about your journey. Because, you know, some of the others of us, we're talking, but we haven't had the actual experience of coming to the U.S. So I say, first of all, welcome, glad you're here. And I was wondering, could you share a little bit with us about why your family decided to come to the U.S. and what that was like for you?
Absolutely. The reason why is because of the Civil War. My dad decided to come to United States before us. They were recruiting, the guerrillas were recruiting kids and men's, and it didn't really matter where you were or who you were. They were just recruiting people, and my dad decided to leave before us so he can kind of set up a place for us here.
And what was that journey like? I think just hearing a little bit, just a taste of what tremendous courage it took to begin a journey and to be on a journey like that. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I was a child. I was about 7 years old when that happened. My mom decided to follow my dad and come over and take that journey. At that moment or at that time, she was not able to, because of the war that it was happening, even though she had the resource to be able to obtain a visa, she only obtained a visa through, we can call it like a tour bus. So we took off like that, and the tour bus was supposed to take us to Mexico, but they didn't actually take us all the way to Mexico. They left us in El Salvador without money, without our luggages, without anything. They just they just, and not just us, it was the whole entire tour bus they left behind with anything. We were kind of, the only thing that we had was the bag that we were able to brought into our own hotel, where we had like our passport and a little bit of money, but everything was left in that bus. So it was my mom, myself, and my sister. My sister was a few months old.
And I'm just hearing that, and that just left, just abandoned a whole busload, misabused their trust. And so you're on this journey. You come. What are some of the things that maybe we don't think about of what it means to come into this country and not have the resources perhaps that you'd want to have? So what are some just practical things that you would face just coming on a journey like that?
Every person experienced different things. Because of this, leaving us behind, it actually took us 3.5 years to be able to come to United States. So I was in El Salvador for 2 weeks, and 1.5 years in Guatemala, and 1.5 in Mexico. And through this journey, it was very, very difficult, not knowing the people, not having a place to live, not having the resource when it comes financially. We did not have that. Schools would not allow me to actually enroll because I was not from those countries, and we're not even talking about United States. I'm talking about Guatemala and Mexico. So we had to stay in buses and hunger and not having the food and the sources to be able to maintain the family. Like I said, different families, they experience different things.
Reverend Nellie, that's quite a journey. Eventually, you do get to the U.S. And can you tell us a little bit about after you get to the U.S. and what happens then?
For me, when I got to United States, I remember when my mom was able to enroll me into a school, and a long, long time ago, they used to give you these yellow tickets to be able to have breakfast and lunch in school. And I didn't speak the language, so it was really difficult. I remember they just guiding me and telling me to get in a line, and they give me a tray of food, and I was so grateful to them. And actually, my first reaction was, because of everything that I've been through in those countries, was, what do you want, or what are you asking from me? What do you why are you giving me this food? But it was such a great thing to know that it was for me just to be able to take and consume some food from school.
What when I hear this and I listen to you, I'm just kind of in my mind playing out the scenario. Eventually, you come to connect with a church. I want to back up from that. What kind of things would have been helpful as you think of when you first, now your journey, we're talking now about your journey some years ago, but what kind of things would have been helpful to you as a person newly coming to the U.S.? What kind of outreach or what kind of neighborly gestures might you have appreciated?
One of the things that it really touched my heart, I was able to go to Texas and be in a shelter home and be able to serve the people that it was actually just crossing the border. And I was so appreciative, and I should have loved to have what we are providing now. It's that guidance, that love, that friendship, that openness. These people, when they leave the immigration camps or where they are, or they keep them, they come destroy. Their dreams are taken from them, their hope. They only want a better life, and just for us to be there and be able to hold them and hug them and tell them that it's going to be okay, and just a simple prayer, and that's all they wanted from us when we were there. So and I actually share this with the group of women that went there, is if I would have something like that, I think it would have been better for me. I would have been in a better place just to have that.
you actually have some pictures. I think we have a couple of pictures from your journey. So now we're transitioning not just from your journey, but you actually went to the border not some time ago, and you have some pictures. And can you just tell us a little bit about what that was like? You were traveling with other women pastors, I believe.
I was actually traveling with 6 other pastors, female pastors, and just hearing their story actually brought a lot of things back to me. Just seeing them in those shelters, and not they don't have a second set of clothing, they don't have food, they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They are just, it's hurt and pain. That's all you can see, and just being able to be there. And I told them, I said, a very long time ago, I was where you are now, and God has everything under control, and just you gotta trust that this is happening for a reason, and you're here now. So let me just welcome you, and I love them, just love on them.
Yeah, and some of that reason that it seems like you came here was then now to reach out to other people. And I know several of the women leaders and pastors that went with you to the border and have heard their great stories. And I guess my question for you is, how now is this very hard experience in your life and journey, and then even going to the border again to kind of remember some of those things and care for and hear the stories of people there, how's that now influencing your leadership in the church and your efforts now even to start a new church? How do you feel that that's making you more effective, and how's God using it and redeeming your story for others?
In the beginning, I didn't understand. I mean, it took a long time for me to be able to just look back and see where I've been, and that I'm here. I can tell you that just those experiences make me love on people even more, and be able to share Jesus and tell them that there is an opportunity, there is a change, there is only God can change the circumstances of our lives. And I even told them, I said, I was there and now I'm here, and it's all because of the grace and the mercy of God that He had and He still have for all of us, and His love. So just loving on them, and being able to tell them that you're not alone. I was there too.
I think that's so powerful, Reverend Nellie, that just your presence, the very fact that you are present, and that you have moved to this point where God is using you now as a church planter, and people just looking at you can find inspiration in how God has moved in your life. What would you say if, say, someone was listening who happened to be seeing us today? What word of encouragement would you give to those who are immigrants in our country?
I know that it's a hard journey, and it's a very difficult journey, but if they trust and put their trust in God, and know that we are here for them. Every one of us are here united for one reason, and that is to be able to help them, and help them find Jesus as well. I think that the immigration status is one of the ways that we can actually invite them. It's one of the doors that we can have right now to be able to show them love, and show them Christ through that. So just not to be, because there's a lot of fear, and not to be afraid that we are here for them, and we're only here because we love them and we want the best for them and their family.
You have an incredible story, and I'm just encouraging everyone to just connect with that Wesleyan life story to hear the fullness, more of the fullness of your story. And we just celebrate with you. Has the church launched yet? Has your church plant launched yet? Or is that still coming?
It's still coming. We are having small life groups now, and it's taking time. We just moved here.
Well, we're going to ask everyone to just be praying for Reverend Nellie and Art Rodriguez and this new church plant. It's so exciting. And I wanted you to be here just to be a face that here's one of our own Wesleyan pastors. So this is one of our family saying that sharing what God can do, how God can bring you and heal you and help you. And so I just want to thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. And again, I just want to ask everyone to just be praying. We're excited. We're just looking with anticipation as to what God would do in this new church plant. He's brought you guys a long way, as people will read your story about your 20-year journey and where you are in the ministry now. God has brought you such a long way. And so he did that with a purpose. So we're excited to see what's going to come forward. So thanks for taking time to be with us today. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Well, Dave and Zach, wow, huh?
Powerful.
Yeah.
It is. It's powerful. What does that bring to mind for you as we just hear a little, even that little tad bit of her story?
Yeah, a huge part for me is, there's those people that don't think much about immigrants who are early in the journey and figuring out how to love immigrants. Then there's those people that maybe do have a lot of energy and really want to help immigrants, or maybe they're a young person and they're enamored with the ideas of it. It's important for those of us that it's a big part of our lives to remember this is not a stooping down. This is not something where we condescend to only help. We are being helped. We have friendship and joy and relationship and resources. Immigrants to our country have resources we don't have. There are many of us who are concerned in Canada and in America about our countries and the trajectory of where things are heading. Much of the solution God may use to be a redemption to our countries is through people that are new to our soil. Yeah. And Nellie is a good example of that. God's going to use these people and order events so that the unlikeliest of people will actually shame the wise. And I think we're seeing that in front of our eyes. And so we're not just helping, we're locking arms with and working together with immigrants to see God's will and kingdom furthered.
You know, you touched on something there, and I wish I had copied the article, but just recently, I don't know if you saw on USA Today, I believe it was USA Today, they had a list of the technological advances and companies that were in the U.S. that were started by immigrants. And so we have this one picture, but the contribution of people who've come to this country is huge. Zach, what just kind of stirred in your heart as we were talking briefly with Pastor Nellie?
Yeah, I think what Dave said is just so true. I think someone asked me, like, what changed it for me? Like, because if I could talk to myself 10 years ago, it would be a different conversation. And what changed it was meeting people, like Nellie. Like, it wasn't, I haven't done anything. Like, people in my life have helped transform me and made me more like Jesus. And so it isn't like serving the immigrant, it's serving with immigrants. And it's immigrants who have served and loved and welcomed me in the midst of all the things that, like, I have to learn and grow in. It's like my church was resurrected and revitalized because of immigrants and refugees. Like, it wasn't like we were doing something for them. They brought life to us. And it's great to know that whether it's at the border, whether it's in the Dakotas, whether it's in California, Texas, New York, anywhere you go, there's things that can be done to welcome and serve and love immigrants, whether it's visiting places, giving hugs, welcoming. It isn't just, I think sometimes we think, oh, it's only for those states or those situations, only cities. It's like, no, it's really from everywhere to everywhere now. Yes. And she will have a ministry, whether it was at the border, whether it's in Dakota, anywhere, to welcome and love immigrants.
Yeah, and for me, it's just remember, I've done a lot of travel. I was a missions pastor in one of my other lives and just loved travel. And I just know what it's meant for me to be welcomed when I was the stranger, when I was the one who didn't know the customs or didn't know the language or didn't know all of the things to do. And so I kind of bring that into my experience now, because now I get to be the one to say welcome, or just, I remember how precious it is when someone just takes time to give you directions or tell you how something works when you don't know. We have no clue of how it works. Yeah. And so I think for all of us, the issues that are coming forward to me, biblical issues, hospitality and grace and the redemptive love of God, all of those things to me just kind of get tied in with this conversation. Well, we actually are running out of time. It's gone by quickly. But I like to close every discipleship conversation with the rapid fire round. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I love your enthusiasm for this. All right, Zach,
Yeah.
how would you identify a disciple?
So I think we often talk about the Great Commandment, loving God, loving people. We talk about the Great Commission of disciples make disciples, but I'm reminded that for us, it's John 17. It's like disciples care about unity. They care about loving one another. So it's unity without uniformity, that all disciples don't look the same, but we are still united as we follow Jesus. So that for us, that's what really matters.
And your best discipleship tip?
The power is in the table. Jesus invited us to the table. We need to invite others to the table, and there's always room for one more at the table.
Dave, how would you
Well, that was a
define
pretty good
disciple?
answer. I had to go second. He zipped over the part that I want to maybe highlight.
Okay.
And he mentioned these two things, the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. And I feel like that is such a great way to remember what a disciple actually is. A lot of times we shorthand it by saying GC squared. It's two GCs, the Great Commission, the Greatest Commandment. And the Great Commission, we must remember, is about going and making disciples. So part of being a disciple is making a disciple. And part of it is going. So a lot of this stuff may feel like it's getting out of your comfort zone. And that's not us telling the church to do that. That's Jesus telling all disciples to do that. Let's go. Let's just get out of our comfort zone a little bit and make disciples. And then the Great Commandment, that we would love God and love others, love our neighbor as ourselves. That's what this is all about. This is this true sense of hospitality amongst those people who are different than me. And that's what real hospitality is. It's not just having, like Zach often says, the aunt you don't like over Thanksgiving. Hospitality is actually having somebody that's a different from us, that's a stranger, that's a foreigner, that is an immigrant to our table.
And your best discipleship tip?
So I talk about this all the time. I was literally in a church last night and did it. I oftentimes just tell people, pull up whatever app you use for texts or messaging and start scrolling. Start scrolling until you find somebody that is far from God or somebody that you really have a relationship with where you are helping them grow closer to God, and reach out to them. I, for myself, do that almost every single day. I think it's a good thing to do at least once a week. We're all pulling out these things and distracting ourselves with all sorts of other stuff. Most people watching this have been doing it all throughout the program, right? Sometimes it's good to just pull it open and remind yourself, okay, who have I done this? And I know I did that last night and reached out to people. It's just very important to stay connected with people that you really could be actually loving like you love yourself. People that are different from you, not just with immigrants, but all people, to actually disciple those in your life.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you guys for being a part of the conversation. And I have just a couple of announcements before we go. I'm so excited to say that our discipleship cohorts registration is now open. So you can, yes, a woohoo. Go online and register. We are excited. You have a choice of 5. Mobilizing Disciple Makers with John West. You have Cultivating Small Groups with Tom Crick. Prophetic Lament, which is a book study with Dan Walker. Maximizing Community Relationships with Megan Cusimano. And I'll be leading the Emotionally Healthy Leader. So we encourage you to be part of a community that will help you as you're strengthening the discipleship model of your church. Second announcement, CCDA is coming up. If you are coming to Dallas in October, be sure to register for our Wesleyan Affinity Dinner on that Thursday. So we'll gather together. The leadership from CCDA is coming to just answer any questions we have, talk about the direction that they're going, and we're just going to have fellowship and connection and networking time. So come on out. And again, thank you for everyone who joined us today for this discipleship conversation on welcoming our immigrant neighbors. Jesus told us to be a neighbor, didn't he? Isn't that how the story ends? Go and be a neighbor?
Yeah.
All right. So let's do that. Let's go and let's be a neighbor. God bless. Look forward to seeing you next month on Thursday, October 17th for another discipleship conversation.
I was born in Nicaragua. One day my dad decided to come to United States and give us a better life. My mom decided to follow him. There was hunger. There was a lot of struggles. We had to sleep in buses, train stations. My mom was selling her body to be able to feed us and be able to give us a place to stay. One time this man said, well, I really didn't came here for you, I came for your daughter. And I remember when she leaned down and she had to say, you're gonna have to do this. And I knew what she meant. The first time that it happened is actually like a scar in my mind. I had to grow up very, very quickly. The abuse happened even when we crossed to United States. My mom, she started to go to a church. Really, honestly, I didn't want it to go. I was very resistant. The first person that I saw was Arturo.
She came in and I looked at her and she was so beautiful. And we began to call each other and just talking to each other. And, she told me her life and I listened.
He saw me as a person. He treated me with respect and with love and with care. And I felt and I knew that I was going to be protected, that I wasn't going to be by myself anymore. So we were married for actually a few years, continued to be members of a church.
I was a leader, so I was very close to God. Pray, read the Bible, we kept in that relationship with the Lord. The moment you stop focusing or fix your eyes on Christ, the moment you stop doing that, you start departing from that. It is gradual, We began not to pray that much, not to read the Bible. And suddenly, we start departing from God.
It was my 21st birthday, and my friend from work threw me a party. She had speed, and it's the first time that I actually did drugs.
And when we least expected, we were full-grown alcoholics and addicts.
I used to do drugs every single day for 20 years, and I have tried before on my own to stop doing drugs. I couldn't do it though.
In my lowest point, I felt empty, and I used to pray to the Lord while I was drunk, and I'd say, Lord, help me, please. I can't stop because I couldn't stop. I didn't have the strength, and I used to fall asleep crying and praying. The day that changed, I had this feeling, I had this strength, and I knew that day I had the power to stop. And I woke up and I look at my wife and I look at my kids and I said, I'm not gonna drink anymore. God has given me strength. So today is my last day. 1 day passed, 2 days, then 30 days. And I did stop.
I wanted to continue drinking. I wanted to continue the life that I had. And I knew in my heart that coming to the church, it was going to change all of that. And I didn't want it to, because it's really hard to leave the drugs and the alcohol and the lifestyle that you create.
30 days later, we went for a walk with my daughter, and I remember that I started feeling weak. I felt like I was going to collapse. Once we were home, I told my wife, Nelly, I need to go to the hospital. We went to the emergency room. The kidney doctor would say, well, your kidneys are functioning only 20%.
Final stage kidney disease. It was devastating. It made me think, why was he at that point? And I knew that it was the drugs and the alcohol that did that. And I knew that my life needed to change. We started going to church. I not only became a person that it was there to support him, but I was there to really seek for God.
I know a lot of people that maybe wouldn't come to these doors.
At this point, I'm still doing drugs and alcohol. One day it was worship and I was just sobbing. In that moment, I poured my soul to him. I cried out like I had never cried out before. I don't want to do it anymore. I want to change. I want you to help me change. I felt a weight, like I was carrying chains on top of me, and it just was lifted over me. Since that day, I can tell you that I have not touched any drugs or any alcohol. It just changed my life completely. One of the doctor visits that we had, the kidney doctor said, you have two choices. you eventually are going to end up in dialysis, and the other choice is a transplant. Immediately in my heart, I said, I want to be his donor. And I remember the face of the doctor. He looked at me and he says, it's not that easy. It's actually 1 in 100,000 to be able to be a match if you're not a family member. And I said, it doesn't matter. I want to be able to try. The doctor told me, he said, it blended perfectly, like it was meant to be.
People that get married are one in Christ, but now we're literally one, because she gave me one of her kidneys.
There is no words that I can give thanks to God. I think that one of the things that I really want is just to serve Him.
Now I understand that God has created a new me, a new person, a new creation. And that's how God works. God is God of new beginnings.
So we tried to turn away from God many, many times, but He always made a way for us to be back where He wanted us to be. We want everybody to know that there is hope and there's life in Him.